terracotta statuette was made 2,300 years ago in ancient Egypt. This ivory couple was made 150 years ago in China. This chastity belt may have been made up to 500 years ago in Europe. For some people, the familiarity of some of these images will be what is eye-catching and refreshing, reassuring them that people have always thought and wondered about sex. For others, it'll be the differences in attitudes to sex that catch their eye and get them thinking. Surprising, shocking, beautiful, baffling. Images like these ones all seem to have something to tell us about human sexuality. The University of Exeter is running a project called Sexual Knowledge, Sexual History, which investigates how past cultures can help us to understand and debate human sexuality. Their idea of including museums and the wider community in this work has sparked a Southwest-wide project which is using extraordinary historical objects from museums as a way of stimulating discussion among young people on contemporary issues such as sexuality, sexual health, contraception, pornography, attraction and desire. Many of the objects used in this project come from a collection first put together 100 years ago by the pharmaceutical giant Sir Henry Wellcome as a medical history collection. The objects are now kept in the Science Museum stores, deep in the basement of an old post office headquarters. In June 2010, 10 young people from the Southwest came to see this unique collection. This is what they found.
Orgasm, which was a vibrator, the modern vibrator that went along to the beat of the music on an MP3 player. Because I find it interesting how it's gone from just having ivory or porcelain dildos to that. It's a new modern thing, they're making it better. I don't know, I just think it's quite like an empowering thing for a woman. That it's acceptable and you can go out and buy these things and you can pleasure yourself and you don't need a man to do it.
And she could be doing it sat on the bus listening to her MP3 player.
Exactly.
It's so portable.
Small, it's discreet, you know? Because I think back in the day men ruled and they were they were dominant ones, and it's changing so much now and it's showing that you don't need a man for everything.
Put men in their place a little bit, we don't have to beat them.
Yeah.
Vibrator for use with your MP3 player. Plug it in and it vibrates to the beat.
You must have a fast song.
And they were all donated by Amazon.
They went for endurance music, eh?
Great invention.
You're going to get one?
Yeah. Too right.
My favourite objects was probably the old-fashioned caps. I liked it. I found it really interesting because it was one of the early forms of contraception and it had nothing to do with chemicals of some sort, as in taking a tablet. It has nothing to do with interfering with the natural body. If we went to, for example, a doctor and said, and we're looking for a form of contraception, I think the cap would come probably one of the last out of condoms and the pill.
This is a puzzle. We don't know what this is. We have no idea.
I have an idea.
Well,
Yeah.
but what it would have been used for?
Multi.
Party situation.
There's quite a lot of people that, if they were brought here now, they would say it's explicit material and it could be found offensive, obviously. I think it's more art, and I don't think people seem to realise that. They don't seem to get a grasp on it anymore. They seem to think that the people behind this were perverted or whatnot. I quite like the fact that it would be able to be seen in a museum for people who want to go and see that sort of thing, who are genuinely interested in it. And if they're not, then I think it's obviously you shouldn't turn up if you will be offended by it.
The abortion tools were interesting to me because it raised the most questions than all the objects I saw today. I just really want to know more and how it had come from those scooping, horrible implements that are really quite scary to how they do it today. They really did look like tools, not just clean surgical tools that you don't see because you're passed out Whereas that, I don't know, would it happen if you were awake? Would it be like backstreet abortion, not even a hospital? It's quite shocking to me. The pain you would go through and you'd be regretting it for months after, because surely that would bruise and tear you internally, which is more than enough to make you regret getting pregnant.
A lot of women died, didn't they, from infections from doing back alley ones.
Yeah.
They used to use coat hangers apparently as well.
Oh my god. Yeah.
If girls were shown this at school now, like
Would put you
what
off,
would
wouldn't
happen
it?
if you were to go in for an abortion? If you were shown the actual tools used, maybe taught a little bit about how it would happen, how an abortion.
Yeah.
Do you think that might put them off? Some kids might just think, oh, don't worry, if I get pregnant, I'll just have an abortion.
Yeah, like
Whereas
they would have a
if they-
different attitude completely to
Yeah.
if they were to tear it out with a big metal rod.
I was quite intrigued by the old-fashioned vibrator and how it was explained it was used to cure hysteria. I'm quite intrigued to think how a doctor would come along and say, oh, she's hysterical, let's cure her by giving her an orgasm. I'm just wondering where that idea would have come from and how it sort of died out, to be honest. And like we were saying earlier, it's not something now you would go into a hospital within hysterics and for them to say, oh, I know, we'll just give her an orgasm, that's all right, because it wouldn't happen now, would it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
One of them is actually called the VD vibrator. And I think the VD is a pun on the Latin for I came, I saw, I conquered.
Hysteria was supposed to be this kind of woman's issue that only women got, you know, had this fit and went a bit crazy. You know, they had to be kind of controlled. Do you think that's something that's still relevant today?
Possibly.
Called PMS.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. The instrument itself looked quite brutal, didn't it? Didn't look like a very pleasurable object, to be honest.
It didn't, no.
It looked like one of
It's
those
quite
handheld whisks, didn't it?
If it hasn't, say that the object that I want to talk about is my favourite because favourite kind of almost suggests that I really enjoyed it. I can't remember what they were called specifically, but the scoops for abortion, the tools for abortion. We're talking about sex and looking at all these objects that are to do with romance and love and emotions. There's so much else outside of just the sexual act. The repercussions of sex and the cultures around sex and the effect it has on women. And I think that as an object it made everyone go, oh my god, how she described it, you scooping out the fetus. It's horrid, it's a horrific thing to think about, but abortion still happens and it's not necessarily even better. Having friends who have had abortions and not being able to talk about it still as, you know, young women, I think it's something that needs to be talked about more. As an object, I think that it would incite interesting conversation. These things should be in museums now, they should be given a chance, and that's why I think that this project's really exciting. You know, it's on young people's minds all the time, sex, you know, young boys, young girls, you know, what are you thinking about sex? But you don't talk about it. And I can talk about it with your friends and it's funny, it should be fun, it should be enjoyable and something you can laugh about, but it needs to be something that can be more open. To be able to have these in this next exhibition would mean to push debate even more into the public eye, not just these small groups that are discussing it.
My favourite object is the pillow box because I like the hidden aspects of it. It looks really normal on the outside, like it could be in your room, on your dresser, but when you know how to open it, it reveals all these pornographic images for like secret goings on in the bedroom. I sort of assumed that it was for the adults, sort of hidden from the children, but I think people may have things like that, like Kama Sutra books and stuff anyway. Probably sex is probably more talked about now than it was maybe back then.
Can you imagine it being in a museum now or in a display, is it?
Yeah, I could. I just think that it would probably cause a bit of a stir now, which I think is a good thing. I think it'd be good to create conversation, debate about it, in a way of showing it instead of it being just like being interested in sex and it being a pornographic thing, but more behind what it's all about. You could use it as sort of relating it to couples and how having sex with just one person is okay, rather than being a culture we have now, guys mainly having sex with lots of different girls is like a cool thing to do. So intimacy between a couple that's kind of committed to each other and just them sort of, I guess, experimenting and sort of just finding out new things.
I think the condoms actually interest me the most. It's something from our time that we can compare it to. And just some of the titles, like anti-baby condoms, which sort of takes back to the practicalities of it. I think that was probably looked 80s from like the text on the packet. I think the collections are quite interesting because a lot of them were very shocking. Even like the early things like condoms, you wouldn't see that now, like the titles, like Playmates and all this. Then we don't know if in the past maybe it wasn't shocking, but then shocking to us now.
I think it's
Because we don't have
different.
things like that.
Yeah, I
And
think it's
that's
crazy
only in
thinking.
little sex shops or
Yeah,
something you would
yeah.
see things
Like
that would be
back
like a bit of a
then,
giggle.
you'd think it would be more shocking than it is now, but us to see the things that they use
Yeah.
is shocking us.
Yeah.
I never thought that
Yeah.
would happen.
That looks like a passport.
No, no, no. This is
Oh yeah.
Put it together.
Like a pack of
Playing
cards.
cards.
yeah.
Make them discreet.
You're kind of more into the modern, like
Yeah,
20th century
yeah,
stuff, yeah. It kind of feels a bit more like us, what we might
Yeah,
use, yeah.
some of the objects here are thousands of years old.
Mm.
Those are about hundreds. It's not really still quite close to us, but still so different. How it's sort of dramatically changed, how we do things, how we think about things.
I loved all of like the Japanese kind of the small little ornaments where everything was hidden and like kind of taboo, but then really fun. The boat as well really intrigued me, where the top deck could move off and then they were having sex underneath. The white and like the way we're in rows were really religious to me in my head, and it was just fascinating. Looking back at what they used to be like in the Greeks, the Romans, and how they used to just have fun with it, I think it's like cooled down my view of things. Like people that are really like tense around it as well, it would be really good for them to see some of this stuff.
Yeah.
How odd that they're wearing shoes and socks.
They are wearing shoes and socks, and it's always men and women.
Would you have any of these objects in your home?
For the fun of it, I would. Just because people would be shocked by it, and I find it quite funny, quite quirky.
I picked the stamps with the sexual positions on them because I thought it was interesting how that it might have been suitable back in those days where people would seal their letters with those kind of things, whereas now we kind of see it as, well, that's a bit weird, people having sex on the back of their letters. I reckon quite a lot of people would be using them just generally as letter seal.
But so you don't think it's specifically of people sending love letters or...
No,
yeah,
not really. I probably like this room the most with all the Roman and Greek figures.
The ones that
that
got
one.
big erect phalluses, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like this sort of... Because I can,
That
especially in
one,
the Greek
that
times as
one.
well, being
Yeah,
out
that
of control
one,
was
that one.
seen as... This
Are you
is
talking about
what
positions
works.
now, or actually the things?
Can you imagine we put some of this stuff on display?
I think it would shock a few people. It's also like you kind of see people kind of poking fun out of sex, sort of like taking the mick out of it, but if you kind of see this stuff, it's sort of doing the same but in a different way.
What would you think if you got a letter with those stamps on?
I'd be quite worried and probably not reply to the letter.
I'm actually going to take this unfortunately placed label off. Actually, I'm going to turn around. I don't embarrass easily, but that was a close.